Sexual orientation discrimination in the workforce. What is sexual orientation discrimination? Sexual orientation discrimination occurs when an employee is subjected to negative employment action, harassment, or denial of certain beliefs because of their sexual orientation. Sexual orientation discrimination in the workforce comes in two forms. The first form of sexual orientation discrimination in the workplace is different treatment. This unfair treatment can come in the form of not being hired, promoted, being disciplined, or fired specifically because of your sexual orientation. The second form of sexual orientation discrimination is harassment. Harassment can come in many ways, for example, inappropriate sexual jokes, comments, or negative drawings. Obergefell versus Hodges. In this Supreme Court case, same-sex marriage was legalized in every state and territory of the U.S. On April 5, 2017, a federal court had an 8-3 ruling in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit that concluded that federal civil rights law, specifically the Civil Rights Act of 1964, protects workers from discrimination based on sexual orientation. Congress. The Equality Act is a federal LGBT non-discrimination act that would provide permanent protection for LGBT individuals, including but not limited to employment. In addition, it would prohibit discrimination based on sexual orientation. In July of 2014, former President Obama signed an executive order that added sexual orientation and gender identity protections for all federal workers. The Civil Service Reforms of 1978 protects many federal government employees. Gender identity discrimination in the workplace. What is gender identity discrimination? Gender identity discrimination occurs when an employer discriminates against an employee because of their gender identity. Gender identity discrimination in the workplace can include terminating a transgender employee after the employer finds out about the employee's gender identity or planned transition, denying a transgender employee access to the workplace restroom facilities, harassing a transgender employee, or refusing to investigate claims of harassment by coworkers and supervisors. Currently, gender identity discrimination is not prohibited under federal law. Legislative efforts to pass laws to make it illegal are in effect. For example, the Employment Non-Discrimination Act is being proposed in Congress.
Racial discrimination involves treating someone unfavorably because of their race or ethnicity. Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibits employment discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, and national origin, including failing or refusing to hire an employee based on their race, firing or disciplining an employee because of their race, paying an employee less or providing them fewer benefits on account of their race, failing to provide benefits, promotions, or opportunities to an employee because of their race, improperly classifying or segregating employees or applicants by race. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 prohibits the denial or restriction of the right to vote and forbids discriminatory voting practices nationwide. The U.S. Code 42, Chapter 21 states they prohibit discrimination against people based on age, disability, gender, race, national origin, and religion in a number of settings, including education, employment, access to businesses and buildings, federal services, and more. In 2008, nearly 34,000 race discrimination claims were filed with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, otherwise known as the EEOC, for employment discrimination. An employer's liability for harassment depends on whether the harasser was someone with authority over the employer or co-worker of what the employer knew and did in response to the harassment. An employer is also liable if a customer, vendor, or other non-employee harasses an employee and the employer doesn't take reasonable steps to prevent or correct it. According to the FBI in 2013, out of 5,922 single bias hate crimes that were reported, 48.5% of them were racial hate crimes, which is when the perpetrators acted based on a bias against the victim's race, color, religion, or national origin. This movement is one of the largest and powerful organizations of this generation. Their purpose is to build the Black liberation movement, and they are working for the validity of Black life. Black Lives Matter is an ideological and political intervention in a world where Black lives are systematically and intentionally targeted for demise. Recently in the news, President Trump proposed to stop immigration, and I quote, "from any nation that has been compromised by terrorism," is an expansion of his blanket ban on Muslims, which includes Iraq, Iran, Syria, Libya, Sudan, Yemen, and Somalia. President Donald Trump issued an order suspending people from the 7 majority Muslim nations from entering the United States for 90 days. This was an act of xenophobia that the American people did not stand for, so protesters fought against airports to let people off the planes.
Gender discrimination is being rejected from employment, fired, or harmed in any way because of one's gender. Title VII of the Civil Rights Act protects people from gender discrimination in general. It ensures that companies cannot hire, fire, give raises to, or give other job opportunities to an employee based on their gender. Title VII covers all private employers, state and local governments, and educational institutions that employ 15 or more individuals. These laws also cover private and public employment agencies, labor organizations, and joint labor management committees controlling apprenticeships and training. Executive Order 11246 prevents federal contractors who do over $10,000 in government business per year from discriminating in employment decisions because of someone's race, color, religion, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, or national origin. Without the Equal Pay Act, it would be legal to discriminate on the basis of gender in the payment of wages or benefits. This act covers many types of compensation, such as salary, overtime pay, bonuses, stock options, profit sharing and bonus plans, life insurance, vacation and holiday pay, cleaning or gasoline allowances, hotel accommodations, reimbursement for travel expenses and benefits. The act requires companies to give equal pay to both men and women if they work at the same establishment. Sadly, gender discrimination affects people all over the world. If women are educated and can earn an income, infant mortality declines, child health and nutrition improve, agricultural productivity rises, population growth slows, economies expand, and cycles of poverty are broken. However, in the Middle East, South Asia, and Sub-Saharan Africa specifically, gender gaps in access to education, healthcare, technology, plus lack of knowledge surrounding violence against women, prevent women from being productive in society. Due to the strong and common views regarding women of the 60s, many feminist protests broke out. The feminist movement was born in the 1960s and 70s. When it first began, feminists mainly focused on destroying workplace inequality. On August 26, 1970, 50,000 women paraded down Fifth Avenue in New York City during rush hour. The original plan for this protest was supposed to be a women's strike, where wives would stop cooking and cleaning until they got equal rights. A common slogan for this protest is, "Don't cook dinner, starve a rat today." This protest was heard by many and truly was the catalyst of feminist protests in the 60s. More recently, on January 21, 2017, the Women's March on Washington took place. Although this march was primarily in America, over 5 million people worldwide marched in this event. The mission statement of this event is to announce to our new government that women's rights are human rights.